Welcome to the Tick Tock Podcast. The clock is always ticking, so let's synchronize our watches and dive in. I'm your host, Callie Brigham, and I'm here to help you make time for what matters. Hey friends, welcome to a bonus episode. I was thinking before I started a podcast, I listened to podcasts. And I still listen to podcasts. I listened to actually two this morning. One while I was working out, one while I was putting my makeup on. Well, actually, you know what? I listened to three because I actually listened to my own podcast more just to make sure that it was loaded and everything was right. And it's actually pretty good. But one of the things that I realized very early on in my podcast experience was that I loved listening to things that helped me grow as a person. And one of the very first podcasts actually was about something called the Enneagram. And through that, I started a little journey where I learned just enough to be dangerous, which is dangerous. So throughout that, in my self-development, I thought, it's probably important that I bring in an expert. And at the time, one of my girlfriends, Charisse, shout out to her podcast too, Rhythms That Restore. She said, I've got the perfect person that can help with our sales teams so that they can understand a little bit more about how they tick, how they operate through the lens of the Enneagram. And I was sold. I felt like a kindred spirit. Charisse was so right. You got to trust your besties. And that was actually when I was first introduced to our guest today, Britney. So I'm going to introduce you to her officially. But before I do, you might be thinking, well, what in the world does the Enneagram have to do with time management? Why are we doing this? Well, I believe a planner, for example, or a calendar or a weekly schedule, that's a tool. But you, with your own energy and your emotions, you're the fuel behind it. So the more we understand and know ourselves, the more we have capacity when it comes to our schedule and what we have to give out to the world. So that's what we're going to learn today from my friend Britney Christie. Here's a little bit about her: a wife, a mom of 4 kids ranging from 14 all the way down to 3 years old. She is the co-founder of the global ministry Be Free Revolution. I'm sure she's going to talk about that, as well as the Retreat House, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. Britney is a marriage and relationship coach, spiritual director, and personality coach. She loves curating thoughtful experiences and ways for people to connect to God, themselves, and others. So, what a perfect platform today, Britney, for us to hear your story, for you to share some wisdom. Let's curate an experience today together. So, welcome to the show, Britney Christie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thanks, girl. Okay, so we gave a tiny bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today, but let's also have you give us a little bit of navigation to the Enneagram, to understanding how having that as part of our tools in our tool belt can help us approach things like time management. So I don't know, do we want to pretend like nobody knows a little bit about the Enneagram? Should we say that they do? I'm going to let you take the lead on this so that we can get this conversation rolling.
Sure. So the Enneagram is a tool. Like you said, it's a tool that has been used for centuries to help people connect with themselves, to connect with others, and in my opinion, most importantly, to connect with God. And so for a very long time, it was an oral tradition that was passed down from spiritual directors, from spiritual leaders, and different people that were meeting one-on-one. And then through the years, it has become more known and more widely understood. I think in the past 5 to 10 years, it's kind of become a little bit buzzy. And I think with that, there is a lot of goodness that more people are getting the information and more people are exposed to it. But at the same time, it loses some of that nuance and it loses some of the the experience of what it can be and the education that it can be. And so what I'm passionate about when it comes to the Enneagram as a tool is to really help people understand and use it as a tool for discovery. So it's less about typing and less about knowing your number to, let everybody know what number you are, and more about understanding the nuance of it and understanding how we can use it for self-awareness, how we can use it for understanding other people and understanding how we tick and understanding how we integrate in the world and how other people are experiencing us. So for me, in my experience with the Enneagram, it is really to be used as a tool, because the goal of it is not to be the best, whatever number we are, but to be more like Christ, which Christ wasn't a number. Jesus was not a number. He was all things. He was all numbers. And so we are all made in the image of God. And so what we want to do is to be in our true self. And this helps us. It gives us a framework. It gives us language around understanding who we are and how God has wired us, and some tricky spots, some sticky spots that we can get into. And so it helps us kind of navigate those. And so just in general, the Enneagram is shaped like a circle. There are different lines on it. It looks kind of weird, but basically what it is 9 different types of personality. And then within those 9 types, there is a lot of nuance. And so there are a lot of people in the world, and we're all made uniquely, and we're all made in God's image. And so generalizing people into 9 types can feel a little bit like we're boxing people in. But what I love about this personality tool specifically is that there is so much nuance, and there are a lot of ways that we can ebb and flow within this system to learn a little bit about when we're in health, when we're in stress, when we can pull from other personality types to get energy. And so essentially it is 9 different types of personality that work together. So that's just a general overview of the Enneagram.
I just heard something recently that labels equal limits. And what I was thinking about when you were saying that is, if we're not careful, and that's why I said earlier, I knew enough to be dangerous. I could easily label myself or label somebody else. We could use that as an excuse for our behavior, right? We could use that as judgment. We could really go kind of in a unhealthy way. And I think sometimes something like this might get a bad rap because of that.
Sure.
And that's not what you're wanting to present to us today. One other thought, just being completely honest and transparent. When you said the word goal, I'm like, oh, okay, let me write that down. And then if that says anything about my personality, and you're like, oh, my goal is more like Christ. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
We back that up a little bit, right, Brittany?
Yes. And what I think is interesting is once we learn how we are wired, we learn how we look at things. And so you're naturally wired to look at goals, to look at achievement, to look at these things. And that's not altogether bad, but we want to be able to be super aware to when it's helpful or when it's hurtful. And so that is what, in my opinion, this tool helps us do, is to differentiate. Am I over functioning in my personality, or am I using it in the best way possible, in the most God honoring way possible? Because our personality is developed over time, and we have learned different skills to help us survive in the world. So some of it is nature, some of it is nurture. People ask me all the time, is your Enneagram type or your personality type nature or nurture? And it's both, because we are born with certain characteristics, and then throughout our life and throughout our experiences, it sort of shapes and molds. And I think for a lot of people that I have seen and worked with is, once people have lived a certain amount of time, they start to see, this personality thing isn't really working for anymore. And they kind of reach a space in their life where they start examining things. People will call it a midlife crisis or different things. And you start to pause and say, I don't know if I want to wear this mask anymore. And so this is a tool that helps you discover that. And then you get to choose, and the power's back in your hands, and you get to say, is this helpful or hurtful? Do I want to keep continuing this way, or do I want to create a new path and a new area of growth?
I think that is freeing and encouraging to people because, again, if we go back to the thought that, well, this is just how I was born, this is how everything has to be, then I think we can be victim minded too, right, Brittany? And that can really hold us back. And so I appreciate that you brought in the concept of choice here. We may not be able to change everything, but we can change our attitude about things. We can change how we approach our environment that might trigger us to certain things, who we're around, who we listen to, the spiritual component. So for you as a busy mom of four, busy entrepreneur, you're in ministry as a co-founder of the Be Free Revolution, which will, of course, link all that stuff for everybody to get to know you more. On a personal note, understanding yourself and your Enneagram, how have you used that to help you manage time or energy? Or you could talk about clients too, maybe that you've worked with. So how can we use that specifically as a tool when it has approached to how we look at our time?
That's a great question. And I think that when you allow yourself to slow down and do self discovery, and as we say a lot, assess the situation, and you give yourself some time to really think through how you are moving in the world, then you learn the things that trigger you. You learn the things that you are naturally doing that you may not even realize that you are doing. And what it helps with is rather than swimming upstream, you learn the current of your life. You learn the things that are naturally outpouring, and you're able to go with the current as opposed to against the current. I see people often that are unsure of who they are and how they're wired. And so they are trying to fit into someone else's current, or they're trying to fit into a mold that wasn't designed for them. And doing this discovery is not fast work. There are a lot of online assessments out there, and I would recommend not doing those because they are only giving a fraction of the information. The test can only give a result from what the answers that they're giving, and a lot of times it's hard to generalize how we are truly experiencing something or feeling something. A, because we don't really know, and then B, because it's just a blimp. It's just a blip on the radar rather than a full scope of how we are experiencing the world. And so for me, it helped so greatly to discover how I was wired and how the other numbers interacted, because then when I walked into a situation, there was a better understanding of the person across the table from me. Even if I didn't know their exact number, I could sort of pick up on some of the energy that they were putting out, and then picking up on some of the cues that they were saying. And it helped me put myself in their shoes. And it helped me to look at it from their perspective rather than just my perspective, because this tool really helps us see that people look at the world from 9 different lenses. It's like 9 different prescription pairs of glasses. And so being able to understand that, and understand that people aren't going at the same pace that I'm going at, or they're not experiencing the world like I'm experiencing it, really helped me open the door for grace and open the door for empathy from a parent perspective all the way down to a ministry perspective. And so it really helped our team. It really helped in my marriage to know that people were looking at things differently than I was.
So there's kind of 2 components there, right? It's the first component of looking introspectively. So looking at myself. I love how you said that you understand and learning the current of your life. And one of the things I've been working on, Brittany, is to not fight things, but to flow with things, right? So fighting might be, well, I've got to do it like somebody else, or I've got to do it like I was raised, or, that kind of modeling, instead of flowing with, all right, well, this is where I have my high energy times because this is what
Mm-hmm.
brings me energy. Therefore, I should
Mm-hmm.
schedule it in like that. Or I know when I get a capacity, like I am done and I don't know if I should say my Enneagram or not, so I won't, but one of my behaviors in stress is to withdraw. So if I notice myself withdrawing, what does that mean about what I am overscheduling myself, or right? Am I on the right track?
You are 100% on the right track. And this understanding this tool holistically, like all the way through, not just zeroing in on our own number and learning about our own number, but learning it as a whole really helps us, almost as if a car's dashboard. So when those lights start flashing, we understand and we can see what the check engine light actually means. If you're anything like me with a car, check engine light comes on, I'm like, I don't know what that means. I could probably drive it a little bit longer, or I need to go get it checked out. And so what this does from an emotional perspective is it helps you understand what those lights on your dashboard actually mean. And so you're noticing yourself. You made a great point of, I noticed myself withdrawing. And so that's a warning sign when you're starting to withdraw. Sometimes we need to withdraw. Sometimes that's a healthy behavior. And so when am I using the withdrawal for a good thing? And when am I not? When am I withdrawing from my relationships that bring me love and joy, and they actually draw me closer to the Lord? And so that's when it gets into tricky territory. And so what we want to do is have this language, have this awareness. And so when we start to notice some of these things, we get to choose to do something with it.
Okay, so I'm also going to just once again just pull back the curtain to myself. My husband and I mean, I guess it's like the Jerry Maguire moment, you complete me, right? We're often drawn to somebody who is not
Sure.
our same Enneagram.
Sure.
My speed in life tends to be a little faster. So when I want something done, I kind of feel like it should get done now. My husband's speed is not at that same level. And one of the things that I noticed in scheduling or time management or interpersonal relationships is that sometimes maybe you're not, it's not a spouse, maybe it's somebody on your team or a
Sure.
coworker or a child, and they just operate from a different lens, like you said. And some of the conflict that we've had in scheduling and in our lives is the different speed in which we do.
Mm.
So after 20 years or more of marriage, I am learning that, again, I said, like, the first part is my introspective. The second part is to think about how he is looking at it, and maybe to function my desires or my priorities a little bit differently when it comes to him. So that's a hard process too, isn't it?
It is, because that requires us to step out of ourselves, which we're naturally wired to do, is to think about, how does this affect me and what do I want? And it requires us to step into empathy, to step into, how is someone else experiencing me, and how can I come alongside them rather than butt up against them. And that's also where compromise comes in. It helps us when we know how our partner or our business colleagues, when we know how they're wired, it helps us to partner them better and encourage them. We say a lot of times, we'll say, some Enneagram types need to learn to pull up doing, and some need to learn to pull up being. And what you're describing is your husband is teaching you how to pull up being, and being in the moment and being still and enjoying. And then you're encouraging him to pull up that doing. And we need that. We need people to come around us to spur us on, whatever on looks like for us.
That's pretty humbling and also very accurate at the same time. So I think what I've been describing too is that based on our Enneagram, we're not just that number and the nuances of it, but we also have behaviors that we project that are healthy. And that's kind of what we're looking for. And then we have our behaviors that are not as healthy, right? So tell us a little bit about that. How does that work? How do we know and recognize what that is? And you used a great example when you were training our team about a cabin in the woods too.
Oh, yes.
Would you share that? I literally, sometimes you hear from people and you have a couple hot points. Brittany, I've never forgotten that. I think it's a genius way to explain this part of the process.
So I I actually heard this from Dr. Tom LaHoo, and I love it, this thought process. So when you're looking at the Enneagram and you're looking at the 9 different types, it starts at the top with 9, and then it goes all the way around counterclockwise and ends at that 8. And so for each number, there's a number to the right and to the left. And you'll hear people talk about wings, and there's lots to say about the point of the numbers to the right and the left. It's not so you can lean on one more than the other. You want to be balanced. If you think about a bird with 2 wings, you want those wings to be balanced. You don't want a one-sided bird. And so the wings on the numbers to the left and the right, those numbers help bring you into balance in a lot of ways. So those personality types are typically different than your dominant type. So let's just say that you're a dominant type 9. So that would mean that you have a wing to an 8 and a wing to a 1. And those numbers help bring you into balance and balance out your personality traits. And then there are also the lines on the Enneagram. You'll see they just, if you're looking at a diagram of the Enneagram, there are lots of lines coming out of the numbers. And those lines indicate the energy that you pull from the numbers when you're in stress. So when things are really stressful. And then the other line is for when things are feeling really, really secure and feeling good. And so the cabin mentality is that your dominant number is your cabin in the woods. This is where you live. This is your quaint little cabin. You get to decorate it how you want, and you live in that cabin. And your wings are your neighbors. And so you can go and you can borrow things from your neighbor. You can borrow a cup of sugar. You can borrow some flour from your neighbor. You can visit your neighbor and hang with your neighbor, but you don't live with them. You don't become them when you go to their house. You're just borrowing things from them, and you're going back to your house to utilize the things that you've borrowed. And then there is this mentality when you think about the lines, in that the line to stress is your outhouse. And so that's where you go to take care of business, and you need to do that. You need to go to the outhouse. You need to take care of business, but you don't want to linger there very long. And you also don't want people visiting you there. You don't want people coming to the outhouse to hang out with you. That is not where you are in your strength. And so, it's necessary. You must have it. You must go there and utilize that. But then you go back up to your cabin. And then that line to security is your orchard. And so you go up to your orchard, you're picking the fruits, you are reveling in it, but you still come back into your cabin to enjoy those fruits. And so that's kind of a fun visual way to think about all those lines on the Enneagram and wings that you hear about. And so that is, in my opinion, the best way to be balanced. The goal of the Enneagram, again, is not typing. People misunderstand that. They think that the Enneagram is a typing tool. And while that is something that it does, that's not the goal of it. The point of the Enneagram and doing Enneagram work is not to type yourself so you can wear it on a t-shirt. It is so you can understand how you ebb and flow. And if you're spending too much time at your neighbors, or you're spending too much time in your outhouse, how you can really come into some grounded, deep self-awareness in order to choose, in order to allow yourself the freedom to continue in that way, or the freedom to choose a different path.
You know, I've like I said, I've loved that analogy. It makes total sense to me. Hopefully, this is a really good practical tool that that you guys have been gifted today listening to this. And one of my favorite pieces on that, Brittany, is the necessity of the outhouse and not the shame of the outhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that, again, probably different personality types can start to feel shame when they are in that stressor behavior, or maybe they feel like embarrassment. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to work through it. And it's a necessary, I like that you said that. It's a necessary part, but we don't need to stay there very long. So that's a really healthy perspective too.
Well, and I think that you also bring up a good point, and something that is important to note about the Enneagram. And when you choose to walk in, if you so choose to walk into this discovery process, that it's not quick, and it's also not easy. The something that I love about this tool, when you're looking at all the different personality typing systems, there are so many out there, and they are so fascinating. And And the reason that I like to work with the Enneagram is because it does a really good job of showing us our shadow side. And I could tell you all day long the great things about your personality and the wonderful things about you. And there is a time and a place for that. And that just, kind of puffs us up a little bit, but it doesn't really call us to action. When we're told how great we are, and these are the wonderful things and the wonderful things and the wonderful things, there isn't that draw to call into change or call into action. And so the Enneagram does a really good job of showing us our shadow side. And it can really feel like, the story of the emperor with no clothes. He thought he was out there looking so good, and he was not. I mean, he was naked. And so that is something I think that the Enneagram does, is it really shows us our shadow side. And like you said, we have to be careful not to move to shame, because shame isn't really helpful. But what we can do is we can use that information about our shadow side and move us towards growth. Because when we understand and we have awareness of sticky points or areas that we could tend to linger into, just naturally lingering into, once we know those things, then we notice. Then we notice when we spent a little bit too much time in the outhouse and we're starting to stink. And so we can start to move from that because we have this awareness. And sometimes we have to go down a journey of, I don't want to say pain, that feels a little bit extreme, but a journey of learning hard things about ourselves, so we can decide if we want to stick with that or if we want to move from that a little bit.
Yeah. And we can pull up. I love how you said that too. I'm going to remember that. We can pull up our doing, we can pull up our being, or whatever else it is that gets us back to our cabin, gets us back centered, gets us back really in kind of God's sweet spot for us as well. So it sounds like this is a process. Doesn't sound like it is. It's a process. We never finish this, right, Brittany? Like we never say, I got it. From now on, forever, I'm golden. So what practical tips for the listeners today? What practical tools? How can we either start on this journey? How can we keep our awareness going? In your experience, what do we do with what we've heard today?
That's great. I think you're right that this is a process and that there's no arrival point. We don't get, a graduation hat at the end of this of like, you've graduated Enneagram 101. This, and the point of this again, is growth over time. And once you discover your dominant Enneagram type, that doesn't change. And that's something else that I've experienced with people mistyping. I've worked with a lot of people that have mistyped because they saw a post on Instagram, or they did a test, or their friend told them and they just took it as this is it. And they missed that discovery piece, which the discovery piece is the goodness. That is the wonderful part of this tool. It's not having a number, it is the discovery process. And so I would encourage your listeners, you guys, if you are interested in starting an Enneagram journey, I would encourage you to reach out to us and get some coaching. Let someone walk alongside you that is knowledgeable about the nuances of the Enneagram and can ask you questions and can help pull back the layers on some of this that you may not even realize. So there are definitely behaviors and things, just even our energy and how we are in a space, that give good information about where you may fall on the Enneagram that you may not even be aware of, and how you kind of enter a room and the experience that you bring with it, that gives a lot of good information. So if you're having trouble finding your Enneagram type, having a coach walk alongside you is really helpful. And so looking for an Enneagram coach, I would just look for someone that has a breadth of knowledge. If faith is important to you, to have someone that can look through this through a lens of faith. Because just like with so many psychological tools out there, personality typing tools, every part of it isn't faith-based, but we can still glean great information from it. And so there are things, even when you're looking at, again, any type of personality typing system or psychological system, nothing is hard and fast. Nothing is black and white. And so you want to be able to work with someone that can understand that gray and that can kind of help you navigate that. And there are also a lot of really, really great books out there that kind of give not just a snippet, but give a full overview of the Enneagram. And so I would say starting to dive in and to really become a detective of yourself, start writing notes, learning without judgment how you're experiencing things, and allowing yourself to sit with these different numbers individually and not rush the process. So unfortunately, a test is not going to give you the answer. You really just have to be willing to jump in and do the work. And like I said, that there are some solid Enneagram teachers out there, but on the flip side of that, there's also a lot of people that are giving snippets that sometimes can be less than helpful.
Yeah, and in the moment, it can be fun or engaging or
Sure.
entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
right? It can be entertaining, and I've seen the ones like how you order your coffee at Starbucks or
Sure.
whatever, and everybody laughs, and that's great. But that's
Mhm.
entertainment.
Yes.
And we're talking about going a little bit deeper. So, of course, in just a minute, I'm gonna have you share a little bit about your resources and how people can connect with you, Brittany. But I was just sitting here thinking, wouldn't it be a beautiful thing for someone to understand enough about themselves that as they're looking at their upcoming week, they might say, I'm going to make sure that I've got some structure in my week. Or they're going to say, I'm going to make sure that I have an opportunity to serve others. Or they're going to say, I'm going to make sure that I've got like this goal by 5 o'clock on Friday that I'm going to nail. Or, I'm going to make time for creativity this week. I'm going to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm out in nature, I'm listening to music, or that I have some control. I may not have control over this piece of my week, but this, lunchtime from 12 to 1, I've got that. And I'm going to maybe withdraw and have it for my own, or I'm going to make sure that I've got security in there in my week, or I'm going to have fun, or I'm right.
Mhm.
So, wouldn't that be a beautiful way to look at your week, knowing about yourself? It's not going to be perfect, but you do have some of that capacity. And that's really, I think, one of the things that you can guide people on. So, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free. And then also share where people can connect with you, Brittany.
Yeah, I love the way that you said all of that. And what comes to mind is knowledge gives you agency. And so when you have knowledge of yourself, then you are able to make a wise decision about what you're doing with your time, what you are choosing that fills you, what you are choosing that you must do. And so you have this agency when you have a self awareness and you're not spending so much time in the emotional toll when you are doing things outside of your natural current, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so, as far as getting in touch with us, so like we talked about earlier in the podcast, I'm involved in a global ministry called Be Free Revolution that is working over in Kenya and Uganda. But then also, we have a local ministry here in Memphis, Tennessee. We just opened up a retreat house. And the retreat house is a place where you can come and experience God in all things. We have got session work from counseling and spiritual direction to Enneagram work, all the way to coaching with marriage coaching and personal coaching. And then we also offer retreats. And so if you're passing through the Memphis area, we have a beautiful cabin that you're able to stay in. Or if you want virtual coaching, we also offer that too. And so we want people to have an on ramp to connect with themselves, with God, and with others. And the Enneagram is a tool to do that. And so we want to work with you on that. We want to walk alongside you. And our website for the retreat house is theretreathousememphis.com and befreerevolution.com. So either one of those ways you can get in touch with us. And I personally am not on social media, but all of the Be Free Revolution is, as well as the retreat house. So you can follow along all the things that we're doing on social media and hear a little bit about what's happening with the retreat house and also with Be Free.
Perfect. And we'll, of course, link this in the show notes. And then also, Brittany, we do have a Facebook community, our
Mhm.
TikTok tribe community. In there, I will put maybe an image of the Enneagram for people that are learning this for the first time. And maybe offline, you can share with me a few other like books or resources. I'll put that in there that you think have your little check of approval,
Yes. Yes.
and anything else that we want to do. So I think this has been I know this has been really valuable as a reminder for me to take a few minutes to recognize where I'm at. And once you say too, where seasons change, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes our cabin is in the summer, it's in the winter, it's in
Yes.
different seasons. And as a mom of four, you know, it's important to understand the ebb and flow of the seasons, where we need to be in this time. So, yeah, any last thoughts that you have for us, Brittany? This has been really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think, like you said, there are different seasons, there's different storms that come. And when we have awareness of how God has wired us, it enables us to weather those storms a little bit easier. It doesn't mean the storms don't come, it doesn't mean that it's not scary, but we have a little bit stronger foundation. It's like we're prepared a little bit more for those storms that come, especially storms that are relational. This tool helps us navigate those with our head a little higher. And that, along with scripture and along with a community, can really be the fortress that we need when we're in the midst of a storm. And so I am just so thankful that you allowed us to have this conversation and to really talk about the goodness of it and the nuance of it and how it can be used as a tool and not just a typing system. So I'm so thankful for that, and I'm encouraged and love what you're doing and helping people manage their time. It is so helpful. So helpful.
Well, thank you, Brittany. I've been really looking forward to this. And when I was making my list of what topics did I want and who did I want to bring in, girl, you were right there at the top. And so I look forward to continue to learning from you. And next time I'm in Memphis, it's usually really chaotic. I
Mm,
think I'm going to need to retreat, and I'm
yes.
just going to have to like say it's a business meeting or something. Okay.
Yes. Book that cabin and get away. It's so quaint and special. It really is a special place.
Okay, that is gonna be put on my calendar for sure. Thank you, Britney Christie. You've been a blessing today, and thank you guys for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining me on the TikTok podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star review. Your feedback fuels our mission to help you master your time. Set your alarm for our next episode, and until then, make every moment count.